All right, awesome. Welcome everybody. John Laster here with the Manual Save podcast, joined again by Justin Connors of 8 Prime Esports, as well as Felipe Barreto of Digital Battlegrounds. And you're actually at Digital Battlegrounds today, so we might hear a little bit of background noise as people are playing games, right?
Yeah, we have some excited players here. They're doing Fortnite, they're doing Dota. It gets crazy from time to time.
No, it's totally understandable. So can you tell us a little bit about what Digital Battlegrounds is?
Digital Battlegrounds is a place to welcome players so they can do their playing however they like, right? We have people that come here just to hang out and vibe, like they say. I'm not that young to say vibe, but I learn from them. They come with friends. Sometimes they meet friends here and they start long-lasting relationships. We have been here for 2 years, and I have seen people start playing together here and keep playing for months and months and months, right? We also have lots of events and tournaments, like birthday parties, competitive events, both that we host and that other organizations book the place to host their own tournaments, right? And the third leg of our business is to offer coaching and help people that want to get more competitive, that want to score more wins, that want to do better online or in person, but competitively. Then we have options for them to learn how to play better.
And what equipment do you have there? I mean, I'm saying this, I'm not going to lie. I've worked with Felipe. I know a lot about this, but for the audience, what do you have there?
Yeah, you know more about my video equipment than I do.
That's true.
But about the computer as well. I have 40 stations for people to play, right? I have more space than that for parties. So when we do birthday parties, we have lots of people that are here just to be around. So we have a room for like 20 people just to be around. But we have 40 stations for people to play. So we have 38 PCs now. They are all basically the same configuration. They all have the i7. They all run with 16 gigs for RAM. They have the 27th Black Series graphics card. So it offers a better than average performance. It's not top anymore because now you should have the 3080s to be the top performance graphics cards. But we opened a year ago, and that was the best we could have back then. Mm-hmm. We also have 8 PlayStations, still the PlayStation 4 because I cannot find the PlayStation 5 to buy.
Who can?
And now we have 6 Nintendo Switches, right? Nintendo Switches. In the beginning, I started without any, because when we started almost 2 years ago, right? I was in Orlando already, doing something else. I was doing a video games distribution business, and I looked around, and it was weird that we had a lot of Smash-centered events. Every day of the week, you could go somewhere and play Smash on weird venues, right? Because there wasn't a game center back then around Orlando. So my thought back then was that, well, this is a very entertainment-oriented city, right? People converge to Orlando to have fun. And if they are into gaming, they don't have anywhere to go. So that picked up my interest, and I started looking around. That's when I found all of these people doing Smash events. There were weeknights when you had up to 3 Smash events going on simultaneously. And I decided, I come from a business background. I know there are advantages to doing business where people are already thriving, but usually you have more opportunities if you find your own space, right? And there's so much going on in gaming that's not related to the Nintendo world that I decided I'm not going to go head-to-head against these guys. I'm going to build something and then invite them to come on board with me and build partnerships and do something for this community as well. But it made more sense for me to start with a PC-oriented game center, also offering some options on PlayStation. I'm not talking about the Xbox because the Xbox and the PC are basically the same operating system. So if people are playing Xbox at home, they can come and just bring their Xbox controller, plug on the PC, and plug and play, right? Just start playing. So there was no point in adding Xbox consoles on top of the PCs. Mm-hmm. And that worked very, very well in the beginning. And I say in the beginning because just after the beginning came the pandemic. So everything was brought to a halt.
Interesting question, Felipe. So obviously pre-pandemic, esports and everything was growing. This was obviously the right thing to do. There was a lot of talk already in Orlando of people doing different installations, having different things, but you got in pretty quickly. So what was from the idea of getting Digital Battlegrounds into the space you have now? How long did it, was it a couple months and you just went for it? Because it seemed like you showed up really quickly when other people were still in the ideation process.
But that's the thing, right? What made me start it was exactly this open vastness ahead of me, right? So it was easy and fast to grow because there was no competition.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 year, 10 months later, if you look around, if you look into Orlando itself, right, there isn't another. You have RGB around us, but they are outside Orlando. Mm-hmm. It was hard to be the first, because the city they didn't know how to deal with me. They took like months to find the right permits to issue to do this kind of business, because everybody there, I know that there has been game centers before me, but when I opened, there wasn't one around, and everybody in the city hall didn't really knew what this would be. So from a bureaucratic business perspective, I'm an arcade. That's how I pay my permit, right? And that's not good, because then I have to pay for each station here as if they are a vending machine. And that's not the business model, right? That's something completely different.
Yeah.
But that's the only pigeonhole they could get stuck me in.
Because you were so early. I say, because you showing up was at the. I mean, there was a lot of talking. John, you know this too. A lot of different places were making the conversations for how they're going to implement esports into different venues. Whether it was a bar, whether it was a space. There's a lot of talk and a lot of people who had a lot of the right conversations. But Felipe just showed up.
Yeah.
And so I've always been curious about that.
I when I did all the benchmarking and all the planning, those avenues were clear, right? You could be a restaurant themed around video games. You could be a bar themed about video games as well. Like Player One, like joysticks. Dave and Buster's, I think, are gravitating around this ecosystem, right? But if you go there, they're basically a very good bar and restaurant with some arcade place for the kids, right? I'm not downplaying that. That's great. It's a great business model. They do a lot of money. They cater for a lot of people. That's not what we do. And I didn't want to be a restaurant with stations for people to play. I want the main reason of coming to Digital Battlegrounds is to play, both casually or competitively, right? But the main reason to come here is to have fun or to compete playing video games. Then on top of that, and that's part of the business model of any game center, I offer food and drink. But it's what I tell my customers, it's survival food, right? Cup noodles, chips.
Cup of noodles and Red Bull.
Just to keep them going, right? So they don't come here because I have great cup noodles. They come here because I have a great atmosphere for gaming. I have good hardware. I have excellent internet connection. Right, that was another hurdle when we started. I needed fiber, and fiber was nowhere around the places where I thought would be the best options to open a place like this. And when I say that, I'm referring to the demographics around it. So it took me 6 to 8 months to find the place, and I wanted to be close to high schools. I wanted to be close to colleges. I want to be close to very residential areas and not the touristic attractions. And in those areas, business like this were not very welcome. And I heard from a lot of property owners, I don't want your business. And I always asked why, right? And they always said the same. One, too many people parking at the same time. We cannot have that because we don't have enough parking spaces for a business like yours. And that was true, because when I got to the point of talking to the city hall about getting me the permit, I learned that for a place like mine that has 40 stations, I have to have 13 parking spaces just for my business. So it's not any strip mall that can offer that, right? And the second thing is, I don't want your customers drinking and doing drugs in the parking lot, And I was telling, man, we are nerds. We don't do drugs and drink. We just stay inside gaming. But I think the image of an arcade comes from the 80s, and that was common then, right? So it took me a long time to find a place, and then I found Fashion Square, and they were very welcoming. For me, it's a great place. It's not a busy mall anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a mall that grew based on retail, and we all know that retail is not physical anymore. It's all online.
Mm-hmm.
So for any mall, it's hard. For this mall, because it's old, exactly as old as me, it's from 73. So they did not keep up with the times, and they need new business, right? Like mine, or like cinema theaters, or like more
Yeah.
restaurants.
Well, that's the nice thing about a place like a mall is they have a massive parking lot and they
Right.
have a good infrastructure footprint. But like you're saying, a lot of the traditional anchor stores have moved out,
Yes.
like it's not as dependent on Dillard's and Sears and JC Penney anymore because those guys are gone,
Yeah.
for the most part.
There's a great example around us here is the Winter Park Village.
Mm-hmm.
That's a modern concept of a mall, right? You have retail, but I would guess it's around 20 to 30% of the space there is retail. Then you have a lot of services. You
Mm-hmm.
have offices, you have residents on top of it. Then you have a lot of entertainment as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what this mall is going to be in the future.
No, and I think that vision of like an arcade being guys going outside and drinking and doing drugs and stuff is again partially 80s and partially with the fact that like when you talk about an arcade today, I don't think there are very many that don't have alcohol associated with them because again it pays the bills. When you're
Absolutely.
thinking about like how do you keep a place like that afloat, being able to sell beer and wine is
No, absolutely. I think that
huge
that
for your profit
negative image they
margin.
have from the 80s is minors drinking.
Mhm.
Correct.
So they had to go to the parking lot and drink because
Yeah.
then they were not being seen,
Mhm.
right? Nowadays, yes, it's part of the revenue. You have to offer that. I don't yet, right? Because I position myself as an esports academy. So I
Mhm.
know that my primary target is the high school student or younger. And I
Mhm.
didn't want any father, mother, any family member to be concerned that this place would be a place where their kids, because they would be kids, right, if you're in high school, would have access to any of that, right? So I started without it, and I started focusing on creating, on fostering this ambience where competition is the primary goal. And competition and drinking and other things are not compatible.
Yep.
So that's how
No.
I decided to start.
Makes sense. And I know we'll probably jump into the COVID situation a little bit in a bit, but I would like to know a little bit more about your background and what brought you to gaming to begin with.
Well, I'm 48 now, right? So in
Mhm.
the last 10 years in Brazil, where I come from, I was the CEO of a big online digital advertising agency, and we had lots of clients in this segment.
Mhm.
And one of them was an English company that was transitioning from physical media distribution into digital distribution, and we helped them plan for that transition and how they would operate in Latin America. Uh, Kind of similar to the pandemic, something as drastic as happened to them, and that was Brexit. And
Mhm.
when Brexit was voted, they went out of business because their model would not be compatible with a separated UK from the European Union, right? So they decided not to go ahead. And I looked at my partner at the time and said, man, we did something great for these guys. We know everything about how to distribute video games now. We have the connections, right?
Mhm.
Why don't we do it ourselves? And we decided to create a company to do just that. And I had learned in all of that benchmarking planning process for the clients that most of the American companies, yes, they love Latin America, yes, they love Brazil, but they know how unstable it is. And they would be much more comfortable dealing with a company that would be located in the US. And that's why I moved here, right? To
No,
start
that
that.
makes a lot of sense. Just
Oh,
from a legal perspective, I know I always feel more comfortable when there is somebody who has a presence within the US because then I
absolutely.
don't have to deal with the international laws as likely, like they may come into play, but it's a lot easier to just be like, okay, this is
Absolutely.
a Florida company
Yeah.
or
And,
a Delaware
and
company.
deciding on going American, right? Being Florida was the only option because we had to be able to travel to Latin America very fast. We
Hmm.
needed to be in the same time zone. So Florida was great. And personally, I come from Rio, so being in a place with lots of sunshine, for my kids, I have two kids, it's great. And we are a very outdoorsy family. So our decision, okay, if we're going to move to the US, let's go be south of Washington, right? We did go to California to benchmark and see, beautiful, but extremely expensive, right? For a starting business, it would not make sense, and it wouldn't have the same connections as Florida does. So we came here. That was 2018, 2017 to 18.
No, and that makes perfect sense to me because, again, Orlando in particular just has a much better cost of living on average than the majority of those other places you mentioned, California, Washington, even some of the big gaming cities anymore, like Austin and stuff,
Absolutely. And coming from Rio, I'm not that far from the beach if living in Orlando. I can be on the beach in 40 minutes, 1 hour.
I live in New Smyrna, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I drive from New Smyrna to Orlando.
Yeah, you can commute if you want, right?
It's not bad. Because,
but I'm afraid of the hurricanes.
Should be.
I don't want to be on the beachfront during a hurricane, man.
That's why you just come back inland for those,
Yeah, and because I have kids, well, one is now 18, getting out of high school, but I still have a younger one, and they love the parks. So it was great for them to start their new life here, be able to go to Universal every weekend if they wanted to.
Are either of your kids big gamers?
They're both big gamers, and the funny thing is, of course, as a father, and I love being a father, right? So part of the decision of starting this is, you have in the back of your mind, let's make my kids proud of me. Let's do some esports business that they can relate to. Maybe they can participate in. Some people think about they're going to inherit the business. I don't think about that. That's too far down the line. But yes, it was part of the decision to do something that they would maybe do with me. Right. The funny thing about that is that the older one took like 6 months to really be able to enjoy it, because he waited for his friends to say, that's a good business. Your father has something good going.
That's exactly what I was going to follow up with.
So,
one of those things where, do they think this is cool? Because it's always...
They only think it's cool after the friends think it's
exactly
cool. So when the friends start coming here, gravitating here, and doing parties here, then they allow themselves to like it. The younger one, no, he liked it from day one. And they do work with me. They do work with me here. And that became kind of necessary with the pandemic. Right, lots of hard decisions had to be made to keep the lights on and the doors open, and one of them was to have a skeleton crew. Since we had to close the store April 20, and had to remain closed for 2 months, and then we had to reopen, and it was very early in the game, but the mall demanded that we open or they would fine us, because that's in our contract. We have to be open when the mall's open, right? So we had to reopen around June 20. And of course, nobody wanted to get out of the house to do an in-person entertainment business, right? So it took us like 6 months to kind of go back to a revenue stream that would allow us to pay the bills. So
this past year is honestly a little bit of a blur, but just like trying to think back to where I was mentally in June, July, I can't imagine personally going into any venue back then, because I was still too nervous, So that's definitely an interesting kind of struggle that you had to deal with the fact that because Florida opened up so early, and because that meant the mall opened up so early, you had to follow whether or not people were ready or not,
Yeah. It was the only option I would have would be to close down the store here, stop completely, and then when I was quote unquote ready to reopen, find another place. Right. But if I wanted to keep the place here, and from a business perspective, maybe I wouldn't be able to reopen somewhere in the 12 months to follow, because all of the investment we made to make this place ready was a lot, and without business for that many months, it would be, for us, without looking for new investors, would be impossible to prepare a new place, a new venue.
No, I remember seeing Digital Battlegrounds before you had it fully built out, when you were still working on it, and it's drastic what it looks like today compared to then. So you've put in a ton of hard work, money, time, sweat equity, all of that.
Create what you've built. It took a lot. But we had great partners, right, Justin? We have great partners. They it's part of how we operate.
Well, the good thing of that Digital Battlegrounds was different was that what Felipe's created in there is a space that does, even though it's in the Fashion Square Mall, you walk in those front doors, it doesn't feel like it's in the Fashion Square Mall. It feels like you're in and this is not me like sales pitching. I'm being serious. I walked in and I was like, this place is, it feels like a fun gaming space. It doesn't feel too cramped. It didn't feel too techy. It was the right vibe. And, the interesting thing and how I always knew that Felipe could make it through this pandemic was that obviously it was working before you had to shut down, but you kind of truncated it, but you did a lot of pivoting in those 2 months to figure out what you were going to do next. And obviously you made the right choices because it seems like everything is starting to get a little bit better.
Yeah, the last 2 months have been great. The last 2 months have been the best months since we opened, not since we reopened.
Yep.
Just before we had to close for the pandemic, every Saturday, every Sunday, I would be completely full around 3 p.m. Right? And that was every weekend. Then the pandemic, then the reopening, and then it took until we are May, so it took until March for that to happen again.
Yep.
And now it's happening consistently again.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. And I know you've kind of had to kind of even figure out how to invent yourself as a company a little bit because I hear people think of things like this traditionally as like a LAN center, but you called it, I think, a teaching academy.
Yeah, we are
various other.
We are
things
Esports
beyond
Academy.
that.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the main goal. And it impacted everything that we decided upon, right? The location, the partnerships we have, the services we offer. It's all based on that premise, right? Our motto is play, learn, and win. So you have to come here to learn. And we have had different partnerships to be able to offer coaching. We had a partner that didn't have a venue, so they used us as the location. Then we moved on to have our own team. And now we are in a partnership with a group from Boston called Uptime Esports. And they have a program that is implemented in different game centers around the nation. And that also enables us to have tournaments among the students or the trainees or the esports athletes to play against each other every week. So that creates a different and additional ecosystem for our customers to be part of. So that's part of those events that I mentioned that people can do here where I'm the venue and I'm not really the host. Right. And that works a lot because if I had to have human resources right on my payroll all the time during these recovery times, it would be impossible. So finding partnerships and finding people that would be going through kind of the same hard decisions was necessary. And it's working out. It's working out.
A thing that you've been working on too that I'd love to just start seeing happening more is, obviously Esports Academy, we've done things where we've done different kinds of training for different games and brought people in, but you've made yourself very available to all of Central Florida's high schools and colleges that if they even want to build an esports team, you will let them come in and compete with each other or compete against other schools. And I feel like places are still learning about who you are, but the people who have come and used Digital Battlegrounds to compete with have always loved it, and you've always made it very accommodating for a school or college to bring their team in to either train there, to play at other college. And I hope that in this next year, more get to utilizing it.
Yeah. From a business perspective, right? I have a lot of downtime. It's an entertainment business primarily. So entertainment business is nighttime during the week and the weekend. So, and I'm open every day. So I have a lot of inventory here that I can play with. And part of what we have done with that is to approach colleges and high schools and offer them to develop their esports programs using our resources, our assets, 100% for free, because I already have them. And fostering this community here in the medium and long term is going to be beneficial to both us and the community. So there's no reason why not to do it. So a good example is the UCF Gaming Nights, right? Full Sail has the Armada and they have a great place for them to practice. But the UCF guys, they are, first, a lot more people. But second, they don't have a lab, they don't have an arena, they don't have where they can sit together and practice as a team. So I approached them and we had this deal where they could come Monday to Thursday every night for free, so their teams could practice like they would play in a tournament, instead of each one in its dorm or just making just a very messy LAN on the Unions Hall rooms, right? So they were able to do that, and I'm ready to welcome them again. For high schools, it was a little bit harder because high schools, I'm talking about public high schools, they don't have budget to create, most of them don't have the budget to create a place like this for their kids to be in esports programs, right? So I approached the 4 public high schools I have around me, Boone, Colonial, Edgewater, and Winter Park, and offer them the same deal I offered UCF. You can come here during the week, practice for free. But because they don't have the resources, they have to ask their teachers to be responsible for an additional course or an additional activity. And that's very hard on the teachers because they are already doing a lot of things, right? It's not because they are just lazy. Of course, they are not. But they are teaching, and then they are already overseeing lots of clubs. And this would be like an additional demand to some of them. So I got to have this conversation with because when the deans see like this, say, yeah, that's great, talk to this person, that person, then you go down the line until you get to a teacher who would be responsible for that, right? And I had 3 of them telling me, Felipe, it's great. I know my students would love it. It would be great for them to know, for helping them to get into college using esports scholarships. I simply don't have the time. I'm doing this, and this. This would be the 5th responsibility on my plate. I cannot do it, right? And then COVID came, so no school.
Yep.
So
yeah, I was going to say, I imagine once you start dealing with under 18, there's different, risks that pop up with, high schools wanting to send students there without, somebody supervising.
Supervision, right? Yes. Yeah. And that's from the business point of view is very risky. And I can get them as customers, but that's one of the main reasons why I don't want to have my own team. Right. First, this has to be a neutral venue for every competitor, for every esports athlete to come and compete. They will never be able to tell, oh, but that guy won or that team won because they are the home team. They had home advantage.
Yeah.
Never do that. Second thing is the drama, all of these teenagers, and their parents. My kids, my older kid used to play volleyball in high school. The parents go crazy. Their kids are crap. My kid was not worth to be on the first team, and I knew that. And I would look around and I would see all the kids that they should be on the bench, but their parents, no, my kid has to play. And I don't have enough court time. You have to do this, and they would face the coaches, and it's too crazy. I don't want to do that.
Every parent's kid's the best player on the team.
I have a friend who does youth coaching, and he has to deal with that all the time. Where again, it's like, well, my kid needs to do this or play this position. It's like, your kid's 5'2". They're not going to play center in volleyball or whatever. Like, they're not going to be the guy who just sits there. They're not tall enough.
Some parents are not.
You can't fix tall. The
harder facts of life, right? About their kids. So those 2 reasons make me much more interested in sponsoring teams, sponsoring athletes, than to managing them. And so far, that's what we have been doing.
Nathan commented, he's a very great young esports professional. He's saying that you're a man of the people, community is so important, and that's something that we always talk about. But I know that's something that you are very strong about too, Felipe, is making sure that you are trying to do everything you can to build the Orlando gaming community up. And, I would say talk about a little bit of the importance of that and what you've seen and not seen in the last year or two when it comes to that.
Justin, it's 100% about the community, right? This is a community-oriented business in itself. When we talk about casual play and competitive play, 80% is casual play. It's people, they just want to have fun, right, in different ways, but they are having fun. So it has to be a place where people feel welcome. It has to be a place where people feel that they have what they like. So we started our game playlist, right, with something like 12 games. Now we have 60, and we have in total over 80, because people are always telling us what they like to play, and then we make that available. Our system can work with all the major platforms, Battle.net, Steam, Origin, all of them. At the same time, I cannot have all of the games because it's a major time sink, to keep them all running, all up to date. So I gravitate around 50, as the main titles, and some of them keep swapping. It's interesting. I use lots of data. My system allows me to do that, so I'm always looking. Okay, what are the most played games? Obviously, Fortnite has been number one since we opened. It still is, but it used to be 4 times the number of sessions using Fortnite than number 2, and that's not the case anymore. Right now, we are between 2 and less than 2, or less than twice the number of sessions for Fortnite. Valorant just took over number 2 when it came in June last year. June, I think so, right?
It was like May, June. Yeah, I think May
Yeah.
officially dropped.
So it was Call of Duty consistently as in number 2. Then Valorant just came and took over. So I try to have all of the titles that they want to have and play. And I also try to foster links among my players. So I host events like looking for group events, like just having free donuts and coffee for League of Legends. And if you play that, come on that day and that night, I'm going to introduce you to other players, right? And that has led to a lot of people playing together. And it as the Mandalorian say, it's the way, right? It's getting people together to play, and it's hard. Most gamers are introverts. Right? We love this because it gets a barrier between us and the other people. But in fact, we want to get together with the other people on the other side.
Well, and you see people try to make efforts to do this all the time, whether it's trying to create a Reddit looking for group to play League of Legends, for example.
Yeah.
Because they have their own modes for things like Clash, where you can create kind of a 5-man competitive environment. But finding somebody who can play top lane at the last minute is not always easy, because it can be kind of niche, depending on what your skills are, especially as you start getting to the higher skill tiers,
But then we also go back to the barrier we are dealing with human nature, right? So let's talk about League of Legends. That was my first event. When I opened, I invited the UCF Gaming Nights and the Fuseo Armada to do a challenge here, paid then $500 to the winner. It was great, but it was just, invitational, just those 2 teams. Then I started doing more events open to anyone who wanted to compete. And it was clear that lots of people play that here on a day-to-day basis, but when I did events, they didn't have the full team here. So I did those events. And it was funny to see that I had a group being formed here, 100% adults, right? 20 plus, all of them, no kids. They got together, they practiced once, and then they came for a tournament. The tournament also had the Fuseo Armada back and the Gaming Nights back. That team playing for the first time in a tournament, of course, got trounced, right? Got completely destroyed.
See, I thought for a
And they
second
got
you were going to tell me
surprised.
they beat everybody.
No. The element here is they got really surprised and they got really pissed off and they never played again together. All adults. It's so flaky. It's another dimension of what I see here. Is this kind of people that are very competitive. They just want to win. They don't want to put in the effort to build something together, to build a team, to find the teammates, to find the roles, to cooperate, to build on each other's strength and do something together. They want the quick fixes. They want the win next day.
I think what you're talking about is something that Justin and I have talked about a lot offline. Yep. And you see this typically among some of the top tier players too, who are not signed by like a major esports org, but they're in that like top bracket, whether it's Masters or Challenger or Diamond, whatever they call that tier, and they'll get together with some people. And if it doesn't work the first time, they just want to blame whoever did the most poorly, And the reality is some of these games like League are so team-based that it's very easy to not realize that somebody made a sacrifice to their own success that caused somebody else to be successful. And when you have somebody who just wants to blame that person then afterward, it's detrimental to the actual goal of the game, Like people focus too much on various micro things that they miss the entire macro to the game.
Yeah. When we go into the coaching side, then we can fix that. Right? We can show how valuable it is to understand your weaknesses, your strengths, find people that complement that, and how do you strategize? How do you analyze your matches, and how do you improve? But you need time to do that. It's not like coming to one event, get 4 people with you, jump in a tournament, face people that have been practicing for months together, and then, oh no, we lost. Well, you're not good. I'm out of here. That's bad.
That's also the big difference with esports in general with these young kids. There's a difference between talent and teamwork will always win, but talent is important. But these young kids and their parents watching them learn to get talented playing alone. They learn to be talented being the better one on a group of maybe 2 other guys and then 3 people they carried, So they feel like they're the top guys. You start mixing these talented kids together. If they don't play well now, then they're all like, well, you suck. And it's like, no, you guys just have to learn how your skills complement each other. And me and John have been through this many times where it's like they just don't take the time. I mean, Felipe, we've talked about it too. These guys just don't want to take the time. Yep. And what you see even at the higher level, they're like, well, I'm taking the time because you're paying me to take the time. You know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of investment in making sure you're playing as a team.
Absolutely.
Well, and that term carried alone can sometimes be very toxic in a lot of ways because I mean, I have a friend who's a support main in League, and to be perfectly honest, there's times where if you're a very good support main, you can take an inept ADC and make them look like they're carrying, but they didn't do anything.
And that's me.
The
inept ADC.
Like, if you know what you're doing, that guy looks amazing, and the fact is, he's probably terrible, and it doesn't matter. Yep. There's a lot of things that go into it.
Yeah, just find the right people to be around. And build on that. That's what I'm trying to do as a business.
Mm-hmm.
A Prime, Justin, and other partners have been essential to what we do. I don't have the community pool, and I need people that can bring competitors to events. I don't have knowledge in a lot of things. I come from advertising, but I don't know all of this content production side. So finding the right partners, I think that's a life approach, right? It's important in anywhere, in anything you do. So,
but I think
it's going to be different in a business.
You have something now that is important to a lot of things in gaming esports. Is now you actually have experience. Like a lot of the people that are getting into this were like idea guys who saw numbers and threw stuff in. Like the thing that I love that you've done well and survived through the pandemic is that you have the thing that is important right now is that you've experienced everything. You've experienced the type of gamers that are in Orlando. You've experienced the communities. You've experienced everything. And that knowledge, I think, is very important to building this esports infrastructure that we need in Orlando.
Yes, and it's a very diverse ecosystem. You have absolutely everything, and it's good to be able now to see who can play which role and have them around you in that way. The gamers, it's quite interesting. Depending on the game, you have completely different demographics and also behaviors. If you look at the Smash crowd, it's completely different from the Fortnite crowd. That's different from the Call of Duty crowd. And they gravitate around each other because they are like the same and they want the same things and they play the same game, right? So when you do events and when you do any kind of program, you have to make your offer compatible with that kind of personality, with that kind of interest and behavior. Our Smash nights every Tuesday have a life of its own, and we are learning every week, right? And we're trying to get that feedback and offer better things to them. It's a never-ending process, absolutely, right? The community always wants more, and they are writing and demanding more, but you also have to know what you can and what you cannot offer and deal with that and talk to them. And they use social media very well. They are natives, right? So you have to be there and you have to be able to navigate that. Yep. That for me is not difficult because of my advertising background. It's very easy for some people to get swamped with that 3 to 5% of people that are vocal and they're there all the time and they are just throwing rocks, right? And then people get afraid of those 5%. But in fact, you have another 95% of people that are there. They are reading, they are following what's going on, but they don't want to get into the messiness, right? And you have to be able to discern what's important in what those 5% are saying and doing, and that you have to respect and adjust, and what is just chef, what's just turbulence, and then go through it.
Yep. So what are some of the big things that the city or the local community could help with when it comes to growing esports in Orlando?
John, we have lots of developers and studios here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see any activity, any actionable plans focusing on the local community.
Mm-hmm.
They, I think, all looking to the macro space about worldwide reach, maybe nationwide reach, and they don't have anything going for the local community. So it would be great to work with them to create long-term programs, platforms that people can plug in and be part of this instead of just trying to reach everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, after what, and again, 18 months, right, that we are open, we have 5,000 people registered with us. We know who they are, we know what they play, we know how often they come to play, we know how much they spend. We have a lot of information, so it would be easy for, let's say, a developer that's doing an indie game on that kind of
Mm-hmm.
genre, come here, showcase your product. Let's get the community here with you. They're going to be brutal like they always
Mm-hmm.
are, but you're going to have some feedback, right?
Well,
uh,
and that's
if you're
something I've definitely talked about with a lot of indie devs in the area. Is once COVID is a little more
under control.
tame and under
Yeah.
control. I know the CDC just set an alert to my phone that said, if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear masks anymore, which is
Mhm.
good news.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But as we get out of this 2020, getting indie devs to communicate with groups like yourself, with like the Orlando game space, with like Twitch Orlando, and try to do some events around getting feedback for indie devs who don't have the same budgets for QA that some people do, and just getting it into the hands of gamers to try,
Absolutely.
is
You have
huge.
that side. You also have the esports organizations, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Like the
I really don't
mutineers.
understand how they think about building their fan base.
Hmm.
I don't. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just say I don't get it. Right?
Okay.
Without grassroots activity, from my point of view, it's much harder.
Yeah.
They just it looks like they want to be on the big league and the big tournaments, winning, and
Hmm.
then people will admire and follow them. But without grassroots activities, without full body contact, you don't have the relationship that can be built that way, right? You don't have the one-to-one connection that can be built that way.
Yeah, I think I agree with you in the sense that sometimes some of these orgs assume that the general public already cares,
Yeah.
when the reality is they almost need to treat it a little more like minor league baseball,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like you need to be so involved with your community that people would notice if you were gone, because the reality is otherwise, why do they care? Because you don't have
It's just
the
another name
200,
in the leaderboard, right?
you don't have a 200-year history that,
Yeah,
some sports orgs have.
Yeah.
yeah.
Or if you're one of the major game publishers, I'm not going to name drop them, but if you're known for two of some of the bigger, say, sports games, and I know you have a great presence online, but if we're trying to build a hub in Orlando as an esports hub, then there should be more invested in what's going on around here and not just the big events. You know what I mean? There should be a lot more integration of whether it's our digital battlegrounds, whether it's our whatever it is. Like there's these spaces that these guys can be going out and helping build this community to the numbers and to the importance that we want it to be. But they have to also be involved as well. It can't just be all the grassroots guys doing the grassroots work,
Well, I think on that level, it's where you got to almost figure out how to frame it. You know what I mean? Because when you're, let's say you're a top 100 company in the world,
Yeah.
you got to do everything by P&Ls and figure
Oh,
out
for
that
sure,
you're
for
making
sure.
sure that there's a reason to do it. So
Well,
like
there's a difference between
I think that's on us a little bit to figure out how that would work and then kind of pitch it to those guys versus expect them to
what's want versus need. It's
interact
like
with
they
us.
don't need to build Orlando up
Mhm.
as a game because they are internationally the game.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm saying as Orlando, us included, everybody, we need to be going to them, being like, let's start working on this because you guys are here. So
Yeah.
let's start grassroots. I'm not saying they're technically responsible.
No, yeah,
we're saying the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. That's
Yeah.
all I was saying. Is it's not really on the onus isn't on them to fix
Yes,
it.
it's on us to go to
The
them. Be like,
onus
here's
is
what
on
you need
us
to
to
do.
figure out. Okay, if we want Orlando to be an esports organization, how do the grassroots people? How do some of these indie companies? How do the city?
Yep.
How do the big
Yeah, I think
Fortune 500s work
that's
together?
the easiest way to solve this inertia is going through the city. To have the official support and the cooperation from city officials would be great. To make this part of the official calendar. Get some events going, get some spaces for that, get the public high schools, get everything that's public to recognize and being part of it. It's going to be great and it's going to be fast.
Yep. And I'm sure. I mean, I know we've met the people. I know there's definitely talks of these things, but we've been in talks for a long time. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of talks.
I think COVID threw everybody for a loop, including
for sure.
them,
For sure. I'm sure there was a lot of things planned before COVID. I don't doubt that. So.
No, but I mean, I think from my perspective, I really look forward to seeing more people just do kind of like what you've done, Felipe, where you've actually gone out and built something, that you can be proud of, versus talking about, well, if we had this, or if we had that, or if we had this, we could do it, and it's just like, well, the world's never going to be perfect.
Yeah, do the best with what you have.
Do the best with what you got.
But
build something sustainable and scale it.
It's also a lot of people are still using data prior to 2020, and it's like that data doesn't matter anymore. This is where we're at. You know what I mean? And I think we need to start really focusing on the data from the last year as we're coming out of it. Not are we going to go back to the exact same number that 2019 was? So.
Well, I guess we're going to have bigger numbers than before.
I think so.
So many more people made a habit out of gaming than before because they had 1 year to sit at home and play it, and they made connections. They know more people that play online. So now it's easier and more appealing to keep doing it. So I think in a weird way, it was good for gaming. It's just that
gaming went through the roof for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, but it's always been through the roof. I think that's even the issue too. Is like gaming and quote unquote esports, or whatever, not, even though we try to correlate them, they're definitely not the same.
Well, and that's one of the things I think is one of the biggest misconceptions. Like I hear, period, in the esports space, is trying to use the gaming numbers to represent the esports numbers, when the reality is gaming is an ocean.
Yes,
esports right now is like a lake.
But
like
last time I saw numbers about that, it was esports represents like 5 to 7% of gaming.
But this is something that Felipe has said many times. He said too, and we talked about this. Anytime anybody's coming in interested, is that the esports gets used as an umbrella, but like the Call of Duty esports audience is not the same as the Valorant audience. It's not the same as the Lord of the League of Legends audience. But we try to talk about them sometimes like they are, or the Rocket League audience. And that's another problem too, is that esports is a smaller spot, but then it gets broken down even smaller if you don't know exactly who you're talking to.
Well, and that's just it. Like I've watched League of Legends esports. I don't think I've ever watched anything else, really, to be perfectly honest. At least in a serious manner. Correct. Not to say that I haven't watched it.
And John,
watched it to learn about it.
Have you watched anything that you felt, they cracked the way to live stream this?
Honestly, not yet. I think that's one of the most difficult things. Like, let's use PUBG for an example. Not to throw them under the bus or anything, but I think they have a very difficult game to live stream. I think Fortnite did a pretty good job when they were doing some of their celebrity pro-ams. I think that was probably some of the best broadcasting I've seen, because they didn't take it seriously. It wasn't treated like a super tournament. It was more treated like almost like a wrestling kind of event, where it's just kind of like build up the storylines, build up the hype, build up the stuff, and just kind of have fun with the absurdity of it all. Because I mean, let's be real, somebody jumping around in a ball and rolling around and then building a mansion only to get shot by a guy who threw a fish at him is a little absurd. So like, let's just buy into that a little bit instead of trying to always sometimes gamers, I feel like, get defensive about like their stuff being super serious to people who don't play, and it's just like, sometimes let's just admit, like, we're here to have fun. It's an absurd situation. Me watching League of Legends or something, someone throwing a tornado at a giant dragon and killing it, it's a little weird looking, but like, it's awesome,
Yeah. And it's depended so much on the casters, to really kind of tell what's going on, but they're just trying to keep it entertaining. And I think that the companies, if Blizzard's going to make, Overwatch League better, they've got to get better at the content that really explains what is happening, and they're starting to, but I still feel like the average person can't look up at a screen and go, I know what's going on. Like that is just not the case right now.
I think the only game that I honestly think I could put in front of my parents and they would immediately understand is Rocket League.
For sure.
And that's because it
And the fight games, right?
almost 1-to-1.
And the fight games for sure.
as well.
Which one?
The
Fight
fighting
games in general.
Oh, fighting games are not. Yeah, fighting.
But they're
games
not
are
up here
still,
yet in the echelon as much as they should be. They're not up in the esports echelon.
I
yet.
always still put fighting games at the community level because for whatever reason, that's where they've been treated, and that's not a bad thing. That's nice to have an area where, again, there's not franchise fees to get involved, and you can kind of throw a tournament together without expecting to get sued. You know, we have CEO in Orlando, which I mean, it's been in Daytona the last 2 years, I think. But I mean, it's still nice to see a community event that brings that many people together.
Mm-hmm. And from all over the place, right? All over the world.
Oh yeah, it's a huge event.
That was the cool part for me is like, it's in my own backyard and I'm there and I'm talking to people from all over the country, and I'd like to see more of that, because I think you said it earlier, Felipe, but gaming brings people together, and it's one of those things when you realize you have this common, interest, you can kind of get past some of the other dumb things in the world going on and you can kind of connect with a person and, have very real good discussions,
Absolutely. It's a common thread that opens lots of doors for you to talk to people.
For sure.
Absolutely. But Justin, why do you think fight games are not on the top echelon of esports?
I've tried to crack that code. I remember for a year or so, I used to watch everything and see everything. I feel like there's a level of there's not a team aspect to it, so it's not as appealing to advertisers. So, like, yes, a team like Echo Fox had one of the best players in the world, but who wants to give money to a guy who, for the most part, when he's doing his thing, you don't really see him. And it's like it's like a single player. I don't know. There's something to I think that. Plus, the fighting game guys, they're brash. There's not like a fun like team aspect to it. It's almost like boxing. You know what I mean? So if they were to get into promoting these events like boxing matches, like I think we've talked about like a grudge match type situation where we'd have more of an event of player versus player. Right now, it's not the game that's selling the crowd. It's like I said, CEO being there is the event, but the games that are there are not the reason. Whereas a Call of Duty event is a Call of Duty event. You know what I mean? So there's no like major like Evo. Evo is not a one game tournament. It's all of the fighting games. So you're not really getting a what is the advertising space of it? It's all of the fighting games get lumped together, and then what is actually the sell is the major event. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right on that. It's because it's an individual activity and not a team play.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it kind of feels more like going back towards something like boxing, which again comes at a pay-per-view perspective. It's never hit the mass audience the same way NFL or NBA or MLB,
and there's been
necessarily hit.
There's been companies that have tried to do online, like very televised leagues, and it just didn't hit yet because people weren't ready for it. People weren't ready to support that thing. Like there was a Tekken league. I know Bud Light had their Bud Light beer league, and I do think we can get there, but at the moment people aren't looking for that yet. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think another issue with some of that is just the fact that these careers are so short that it's hard to necessarily build a true attachment to a single individual.
Yeah.
Because that individual may only be in esports for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
The nice thing about a team is you can build that feeling of attachment to the entire org.
Yeah.
And your favorite 3 players may cycle out, but then they add in somebody new before they're gone, and you're like, okay, I like that guy now, and then you can kind of like more gradually kind of get introduced to new people, and I think that helps.
And my last thing, and anybody who has been attached to anything Nintendo knows, is that the fighting games actually don't get much support. I think Brawlhalla's been getting a lot better. I think Rivals of Aether, with their come up, has gotten better. But a lot of the fighting games don't have the resources to do the things that the major esports are doing, or they're just not doing it. They're just not getting themselves involved. And fighting games for some reason just doesn't have that buy-in like some of the bigger games do. So you are dependent on the community-based things like Evo, like CEO, like the convention-based games, because the company themselves, a Capcom, isn't putting on a big tournament for their game.
Yeah,
Somebody
Nintendo's
else
not
is
running a
organizing
Smash
that for
tournament
people.
typically.
Yeah, Smash tournaments are ran by people, not by Nintendo. You know what
Which
I mean?
is the weirdest thing in the world if you know anything about Nintendo's litigation history and the fact
for sure.
that, again, you know, a 3-year-old girl playing Mario on the piano is going to get a cease and desist, you know?
For sure. So,
Yeah, maybe that's the case.
there's
But
many
it's a
different
great
ways.
community anyway.
It is.
Well,
I'm a big fan of it.
And I think that's why you always hear these arguments for franchising or not for franchising and various things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I think the genuine conversation that always gets glossed over with esports, because everybody wants to hype it up, nobody really wants to be super realistic with it at times, is the fact that we haven't figured out monetization to where
100%.
it's not just an advertising arm of the game company. Because I think that's kind of what you actually just got at, Justin, is if a company like Riot is willing to basically say, this advertises my game, it keeps my player base engaged, it keeps people wanting to spend more hours in my game, it makes new players come and look at it, I'm going to spend money on it as customer acquisition, and therefore I don't mind losing money.
Yep.
You know, but outside of that, a lot of the teams, they get investment, they have to continually burn investment, you know, and it's not something that is built to a perfectly sustainable way yet. And you know, I think that's partially why those teams you don't necessarily see spending as much time at the local level as we'd like, is because they're still so paranoid about how do we, you know, be profitable, how do we you know, show our investors that we're spending every dime the best we can, you know. And it's
also,
a very difficult conversation.
How does the team really make the money back too, which is always the interesting thing we say, because you know, if I know obviously E United had one of the best, I'm going with Smash again, Smash players. There's been, you know, there's been players who have attached to these big teams, but like sending that person off and then when they win being like, my business model is going to be taking a quarter of your winnings, like that shouldn't be the case. There should be a whole different aspect to it, you know. So
yeah, monetization is key, right? If people don't make money, they're not going to do it. So
for sure.
And right now, the way to do it is sponsorship. It's nothing much more than that.
That is the drive for sure. Yeah. Sponsorship, or if you can get back to doing live events and having attendance, like that's the other thing.
But when we had big events, proceeds at the gate were that significant?
At the time, I mean, back in the day, I mean, it depends on who you're talking about. But I mean, if you were to use something like what ESL does and their numbers, they were huge. So
yeah. But then it's a huge platform.
Yeah. But a lot of people are using numbers for things that have a giant community behind them and thinking you can just go, okay, well, it worked for them, so it's going to work here. And it doesn't work if you don't let the community build that hype. So
absolutely.
Can't stress that enough.
Yeah. And how much do you think from a content production point of view, people are not doing about building the profiles of players themselves?
I said my big thing is you hear amongst all of esports how important content is, but yet I don't see it as much as it's preached. I feel like every team talks about, you know, how important content is. Every game talk about, but I feel like outside of like 3 teams, no one really does it that well. So it's like, what is the rest of the teams doing with their money that they're putting? You know, the content is important, but I do think that there's still a weird shortage. But I mean, as something I've discussed with John too, is getting people who are just players to also make content is not easy. It is not easy at all.
That's kind of what I was about to say.
Yeah.
That's kind of the hardest part is you can have the team understand it.
Yeah.
You can have the investor understand it. You can have the brand manager understand it. You can have the content creator understand it, but sometimes the players don't care.
And that's who
because
you're
they're just
selling,
like, I don't actually get paid extra to do all this stuff, you know.
And I'm good at gaming. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah,
good at doing
they're like, well,
stuff, right?
and another thing to remember is a lot of gamers are introverts by nature, so asking them to suddenly, you know, do some kind of scripted comedy bit, you know, to build hype around something doesn't always work as you intend it, you know. And I mean, you run into this issue, whether it's traditional athletes, esport athletes, even some influencers themselves who are pure content creators can sometimes get to this, because, you know, it's just like, if you're not necessarily getting paid for that exact piece of content, sometimes you're
Mm.
like, do I need to do it? You know,
Mhm.
like
Well, that's also the hard part too. Is a lot of teams were then starting to go, okay, let's start as a team bringing on content creators, quote unquote, like Twitch streamers and all that kind of thing, not knowing that that person's audience doesn't mean that their audience is going to follow your team. That person's audience follows that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
in
a lot of
general.
people think
Soccer,
they
like,
just it's just going to move right over, and it doesn't always correlate to that because they didn't come on board to like your team. They came on board to follow that person.
Unless it's a more organic way
More
of
organic. They
combining
have to
it,
build it.
because someone like Ninja did a good job of building the audience for Tim the Tatman and Lupo and some of his other friends by organically just playing
Playing
with them,
together for
you know?
sure. Yeah.
And like that helps, you know. It makes
Yeah,
it
but
feel less
you don't have
bored.
if you're I'm gonna throw a team out there. Everyone's say if you're even though they picked up Butters, who I like, you're the Atlanta Reign. Picking up somebody to be your stream person isn't gonna mean that all the people that she streams to is gonna be your fan. You know what I mean? So you just got to find the ways to integrate the community more into it, not just think that an audience is going to follow somebody.
Yeah, but
No,
maybe that's based on showing gamers as people and who they really are.
For sure, but then you got to making the content with them,
That's
like having
yeah.
an athlete come in and try to like have them actually sit down, and if we've talked to even some of the guys who come to play there, like trying to have an interview with them would be impossible because they just are good at the game, and that's the only thing they really care about.
Yeah, the orgs have to invest a lot of money on that behind the scenes build up.
Yeah, for sure.
Showing
For sure.
the people behind the gamer.
Yep.
That could be good. Let's see what they do.
Yeah, a lot of the leagues right now, the major ones, are very lucky that they have personable casters, and that's about it. Like that's what they're lucky they have.
That's one of the best parts about League of Legends is those casters are very
They're integral to the whole system. Yeah.
Like if you suddenly lost Kobe, I think they already did lose Jat, and I think they might have lost Riv, but they've done a good job of continuing to add people. And that's a big deal.
Yeah, this mod is going to evolve a lot
for sure. It has
because it's not real life esports, right? It's all esports. You could get to the point of have a point of view from inside the arenas, following the players. Right?
I've always thought that was going to be it. When VR became a thing, I thought we were definitely going to get that.
I'll be honest. I think what a lot of people I know are looking forward to is the moment you can literally have that like Yu-Gi-Oh experience with a card game.
Yes.
Like the moment you can actually sit there and put a card down and all of a sudden the monster pops up and
in the polygons that you're used to
seeing.
That's
what I mean. Like
yeah.
Not the low end stuff, but like like actually put on, like, I don't care if I have to wear glasses for that. If I could see that would be cool.
Yeah.
And that would make me want to watch Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone or I'm blanking on Runeterra, all those other card games, because that makes it super interesting to me.
But to go into what Felipe said too, and we talked about this with I forgot who he was, John, the other guy who did the VR stuff. Sean, yeah. It's like I always thought that eventually we'd have it where you had a seat in an arena with, like, virtually, and you look down and you see the League of Legends like map in front of you, and you felt like you were in a stadium full of people who were all watching through VR. I always thought we would get there. At some point, or Call of Duty's when they had that stadium in the Warzone. I thought eventually we were all gonna drop into the Warzone map and sit around in those seats and watch the people playing on the field. I thought that's where we were going with all of this, and then the fact that it never happened kind of blew my mind. I was like, this is the way you interact with these people. This is how you get more people to be a part of this thing if we're going to the next level. And I'm really surprised we haven't jumped there yet. There's obviously got to be reasons. There's companies who I know have talked about it, but something has stopped everybody from going to do that next level.
No, but if you go back to what John was talking about, P&Ls, right? Mm-hmm. All of these companies are first targeting at the mass audience,
where they make their money. Yeah,
and the mass audience doesn't even have great bandwidth to begin with.
Yeah,
right. So they have to do all of these basic games first, and then maybe later on they're going to have tiers where these or that public are going to pay a little bit more to have a little extra in the game. But it's a minority.
That's why you always see, even issues with early adoption for something, whether it's Stadia or xCloud or anything like that, is, again, let's just use Redmond for an example. They have good internet up there. You suddenly move that to a random city in Oklahoma that doesn't. or somewhere else in the honestly Oviedo, Florida does not have good internet. We're right next to UCF.
Yeah.
We should have good internet.
Yeah.
There's no reason why not. We're not in like a backwoods area, but I could barely get 10 upload, when I lived in Oviedo, and I was streaming full time at the time. And when I talked to my Twitch rep, he's like, you need at least 12, and I'm like, well, I'm trying, but I pay for the best plan they have. What do you want me to do? Like I can't afford to just go move to be able to stream on Twitch. It's not like you're making that kind of money, so it's a difficult struggle for a lot of people there. For me personally, that's one of the things I would love to see is us put a little more effort into building our infrastructure as a country, because better internet's going to mean better high-tech jobs moving forward down the road,
For sure.
And I think all of that stuff becomes essential as we start to head to a world where, more things are done by code than by, physical,
Yeah, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah,
it's the basic struggle, iOS and Android, right? We have iOS for a few. They have handcrafted jewels for them in the digital world, but most people don't want to pay anything. They go Android and they get what they paid for. So meaning not much, right?
So do you have any events coming up, Felipe, that people could participate in if they were interested?
John, we have this Saturday, we have an event with a partner from New Orleans that has moved to Orlando, and he's doing 2K and Tekken on the same day. Don't ask me why, but he says it's great. Yeah, he has tried it before, and he knows it works, right? So that's this Saturday at 7. Then every Sunday we do Fortnite events, cash prizes. The local community participates a lot in that. The main one we are doing together with Justin is every Tuesday is Smash nights, starting at 6 for registration. People can play from 1 p.m. if they want. We have setups available for everybody, so they can start playing at 1 and play all night until 11. We usually finish around 11:30.
Yeah, it fills up pretty quick too. The bracket, it's now that it's there, it's grown and it keeps growing. So it's a really fun if you're into that. If you're into Smash and it's a fun event to watch. So these kids, they love playing that game. So
and it's guaranteed $300 in the prize pool, so you can make some money.
No, and then for anybody looking to learn more about Digital Battlegrounds, I think your website is digitalbattlegrounds.gg.
I'll
make sure that gets linked in the YouTube VOD for this.
Thank you. We are much more active on social media than on the website. So our Instagram, it's all Digital Battlegrounds, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Awesome.
That's and then Twitch. Make sure you watch the Twitch too.
There you go.
All right, guys. I really appreciate your time, Felipe. Thank you
for inviting me.
Us. This was a really good conversation.
That was great.
And thanks again.
Let's do it again whenever you want. Thank you, guys.
Sure. Hopefully in person at Digital Battlegrounds.
Yeah, let's do that.
We'll get it going.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
All right, later.